on an alien world thousands of light years from home, the colony ship Sigalo and its 80,000 settlers were dying. There were many theories as to what had gone wrong in the transit, but the simple fact was the Earhart colonization program's flotilla had emerged far, far off course. They had left Earth with the expectations that a fully fledged colony awaited their arrival, but instead found an entirely uncharted system, one which they were not prepared to colonize themselves. To mitigate risk to the flotilla and their colonists as a whole, a hastily organized colonial assembly chose to split up the fleet. The colonists were sent to 19 sites, hastily surveyed, and scattered across the system's many planets and moons. Orbiting one such site, a virgin world that in many ways resembled Earth, they drew up plans for settlement for as long as they could afford. Finally, their dwindling supplies forced their hand, and the final landing sites were chosen. The reduced flotilla was divided further, and from the small collection of colony ships that had arrived in orbit, a single one, the Sigalo, set course for an unremarkable section of an unremarkable peninsula. But for 7 years now, firmly stranded on an alien world and with contact lost with their neighbors, the people of Sigalo have struggled. Their small, rocky moon had a breathable atmosphere and verdant oceans, seemingly everything necessary to support plant life, but their orbital preparations had been too hastily completed. Too late had they realized that the crops and trees grown in this alien soil would asphyxiate themselves as they matured. To make matters worse, the ship's depleting power supplies, not prepared to deal with supporting life for this long, had begun choking Sigalo's support systems, affecting everything from heating to crop production to how many times one could flush the toilet each day. Many attempts had been made to create makeshift solutions to their power crisis, small solar arrays and wind turbines made from scraps aboard the ship, but it wasn't nearly enough. For years now, Sigalo's occupants, sheltered within, had been relegated to nearly frozen, huddled masses, rationing what little food they could grow. Even the most optimistic estimates placed the death of the last colonist at no more than 5 years away. But on May 11th, 7 AL, as the ship's systems ground to a halt in what had become a daily ritual, Fan, a biologist brought along to work in the onboard agri-farms, had a brief stroke of pure genius. Since landing, Fan and his team worked tirelessly, attempting countless techniques to breathe life into seeds brought from home, planted in the alien planet's tantalizingly similar yet frustratingly different soil. In the emergency lighting and frigid cold of the dying ship, on a metal-paneled wall of his cabin, night after night, Fan had etched countless formulas while his family slept. His tablet had run out of power months earlier, and no one had thought an extrasolar colony would need extra ink of all things. So, night after night, with no other option, he had painstakingly carved his ideas onto his wall, with nothing to show for it but failure after failure after failure. But on that night, in what would become a defining moment in the history of Sigalo, Fan carved a formula that solved both their plant and energy problems in a single, brilliant stroke. It was a formula so innovative that it would alter the planet's history forever. A process in which the genome of a plant, in this case a pine tree, could not only be rewired to survive in this alien soil, but produce a steady stream of electricity as a byproduct. Fan's plan would add diodes genetically modified to become part of the plant's root system, in theory allowing the capture of an electric current from the toxic reactions between the plant's roots and soil. If successful, that electricity could be transferred between plants from root to root, creating an ever-growing, self-sustaining source of power. It was scintillating in its possibility, but the genome editing process needed to fulfill such a formula required a massive investment of energy. power that the Sigalo simply could not afford to spare. A nervous Fan brought his formula to a considerate and polite, yet skeptical colonial assembly. Fan, for all his genius, was prone to fits of excitement, and the colony had invested many of its resources into previous failed experiments that Fan had also promised would solve the ever-worsening crisis. Now, there was simply not enough left to spare. Many were of the opinion that the precious reserves of power should be used to keep things running as they were. But Fan argued vehemently that their colony was in a downward spiral, and the ship's crippled system, barely able to support those living inside, could only be saved by his method. Diverting all reserves of power to his project for just a few months, he claimed, could save the people of Sigalo and break the cycle. The assembly was sympathetic, but the risk was too great. The leadership of the Sigalo recognized the merit of his plan, but they had heard the same promises during his previous efforts. After a brief but passionate debate, they ultimately refused to sacrifice the entire colony for yet another experiment no less likely to fail than the others. They granted only small concessions, and while feigning a gracious smile, a resigned Fan knew his underfunded project and the colony at large would be doomed to a slow but inevitable death. While standing on the shivery overlook at the ship's stern that same day, Fan was approached by Lieutenant Commander Banza, a lower-ranking member of the Colonial Assembly. Banza lacked the expertise to judge the merit of Fan's work, but he knew that whether in 5 years or 5 months, the Sigalo was doomed to fail. Only drastic action could save them now, and Fan's proposal, no matter how much of a long shot, was still a shot at success. And so, on the stern of the Sigalo, Banza outlined his clandestine plot. Where the assembly had offered an inch, they would take a mile. Granted special access to the ship's central systems, Banza and a growing cadre of like-minded officers would help Fan siphon power in secret, knowing full well that if their mission was to fail, their actions would surely spell the premature end of the colony, but not before their own executions. For months, Banza worked to create a kind of shadow organization, shifting schedules and transferring key personnel. Under the guise of regular maintenance, Banza ordered a small group of technicians to take an exploratory rover directly outside the ship's power supply bay, where the hull could be sliced open and power extracted directly from the ship's massive battery stores. This power was rerouted to a tree nursery hidden on the far side of a remote ridge. Fan worked day and night there, knowing that any miscalculation or wasted moment would lead the 80,000 souls aboard Sigalo to a slow and arduous death. By the time the Sigalo's Colonial Assembly discovered the source of their intermittent power drains and arrested Fan and Banza, the pair had grown an entire field of pine saplings. Fan tried to appeal to his detainers to continue his work, but nothing Fan could say made any impact. Fan, Banza, and the rest of their co-conspirators were held in the depths of the ship, charged with treason, conspiracy, and a host of other crimes. They awaited execution, and each day when they awoke, they fully expected it to be their last. But as months turned to years, Fan began to question why he and the others were still alive, and more importantly, how the lights of his cell remained powered. Then, one day, seemingly no different than any other, every charge was dropped, save one. They were free to go. Upon their release, few members of the assembly quietly requested the pair attend a small gathering on a well-known vantage point at the stern of the ship. Ironically, the same spot, Fan realized, where years earlier he and Banza had made the first choice to risk their lives and the lives of every man, woman, and child on the Sigalo. When the two looked out towards the horizon, they saw the reason for the gathering. Not only had the saplings of the nursery grown, but there were now countless other pine trees, fanning out from the nursery behind the ridge. For the crime of trespassing, the only charge not dropped, Fan and Banzer were sentenced to a day's hard labor to be completed on the farm they had built in secret. It was a sentence both men were happy to serve. It would be revealed later on that many of the Assembly's members had known or at least suspected what Fan and Banzer were up to, and had decided not to intervene. The minutes of the unofficial Assembly meeting atop the stern of the Sigalo were never entered into the official records, and the discussions that took place there, while surely influential, remain unknown, save a single phrase spoken by Fan himself. Today, the colony ship Sigalo is a distant memory, but traces of that memory remain. In the center of the now prosperous and forested city of Sigalo, where hundreds of thousands live their lives free from the worries that afflicted their ancestors, there stands a monument, a single piece of metal taken from Fan's cabin. On this panel, Fan's etchings can still be seen, and below, a plaque with his now famous words. The past is engraved in metal and stone, but like trees bowing to the wind, the future bends to our will.
In Skylines Invicta, founders of Antares, myself and Skibbeth tell the story of Sigalo, the capital of the Antares Confederacy, from Templin Institute's Stellaris Invicta Season 2. Each month, this crossover project will feature 4 new episodes and a host of live streams. Alternating on the Citywokcitywall and Skibbeth channels will be an episode like this one, a behind-the-scenes look at the episode, and at least a few City Skylines live streams where viewers and patrons can vote on the names of buildings, districts, monuments, famous citizens, and more. 2 additional episodes on the Templin Institute channel will tell the story of the larger galactic plot, and each Saturday the Templin Institute will live stream his progress in Stellaris on Twitch. Make sure to subscribe to Templin Institute, Skibbeth, and Citywokcitywall to catch it all. To learn more about Sigalo and how we made this episode, make sure to check out the behind-the-scenes video that Skibbeth and I made, which is currently out on his channel right now. For special perks like exclusive polls, Q&As, patron-only live streams, and Antares Confederacy memorabilia mailed directly to your home, you can become a patron of any one of our channels. Right now, any $15 patron of the Citywokcitywall channel will receive a limited supply deed to a plot of land in Sigalo, giving you exclusive naming rights to anything built on that land, and a high-quality frameable piece of Sigalo's history. An hour after this video is released, the Templin Institute will also be streaming from the Antares Confederacy on Twitch. We hope to see you there.